Wells. I'm your hostess, and you are watching Tea Time with PJ Gangsta. I am talking with a beautiful lady from Canada, correct?
Yes.
And what do you do? Who are you?
What?
How do we find you? How do I stalk you?
Well, you stalk me. I guess you can't really stalk me on Twitter because I've been banned. Uh, yeah, you can maybe stalk me on Parlor or Parlay or whatever they call it, because I have an account there. You can also check out my YouTube channel, which is called Girl Writes What. So, and I do men's rights and anti-feminism and sort of basically branching out recently into skepticism of all social justice and sort of mainstream narratives, trying to pick things apart and figure out where things are going. So
What was the name of your website?
I don't have a website. I have a blog. It's called
Yeah,
owningyourshit.blogspot.com. So,
yeah. That's that's. I just wanted to hear you say it.
well, and I know I can say it because you guys aren't FCC regulated. So,
Wow. I just wanted to hear you own your shit.
well, I own it. I still smell like bug spray from yesterday. I was out banging up fence boards and putting up fence rails all day yesterday, and ugh, I
So,
smell like off, deep woods off.
how long have you been doing this?
For about 10 years,
Really?
since been talking and reading about it, researching it since about 2009. And then I started my blog in 2010, and then my YouTube channel in late 2010, I believe, maybe early 2011, something like that. So
Are you married with kids? Where are you at in life?
I was divorced in 2009. I have three kids, had two stepsons now. Unfortunately, I have one stepson. The younger stepson is deceased. Um, and I am with a man. I've been with him for about 9 years, maybe 10. Um, and he's a really wonderful man who supports what I do, and he earns enough money in his work that I could get rid of my day job and sort of do this full time. So
So following your dreams.
I don't know if it's my dreams. I just stumbled into it and found it really interesting, and so I stuck around and got passionate about it. But I mean, it's not some kind of, it's not like with my sister. She, when she was 6 years old, she knew she wanted to be a doctor, and then she went out and did that. I was always kind of like, I don't know what I want to do, and I kind of went from cooking jobs to waitressing jobs and other kinds of jobs like that. Um, and then I just stumbled across sort of the men's movement online, and it really uh, captivated me. And there was so much information out there that, you know, once I had the internet, and I always kind of looked at sort of the gender politics thing as it was kind of like a swarm of gnats buzzing outside my screen window, and I was always too busy and didn't have the opportunity to go and look at what was outside that was attracting them. And when I actually got good and online, right, like just really internet savvy and figuring out where to and how to find things, and I was a late adopter of the internet. um, there was so much information that you just don't get in the newspaper that gets delivered to your house, um, that I thought was just really being ignored, and there was so much that I saw that was sort of going on, um, that I just dove right into it and went full bore on it. So yeah.
So I have a controversial question. When you see women, single mothers voting in the United States, do they vote for a man that would almost like be a surrogate husband?
That's actually borne out by statistics that single women tend to vote for politicians who uh, have a sort of a social safety net type policy platform. And conservative women tend to be women who are married, right? So, if you look at it, it's all driven by sort of an instinctive degree of self-interest, right? If you're a single woman, particularly a single mother, you don't have a man in your life who's providing things for you, you're going to want the government to provide some of those things for you. Whereas if you're a married woman, you're going to be voting for policies that help your husband keep more money in his pocket. So
it's okay to be um, independent, but yet, oh, how do I put that? You can still be
there's no such
married
thing.
and be a
There's no such thing.
strong
There's
woman.
no such thing as an independent mother.
Well,
I'll tell you that right now. There's really no such thing as an independent mother. Um, Mothers are well, I mean, maybe in the very, very highest income strata, the top 20%, you can have a single mother who is completely financially independent, not dependent on a man, not dependent on government, not dependent on subsidies, not dependent on tax breaks, not dependent on any of those things. But to look at mothers in terms of as a group, there's no such thing as independence there. They're depending on someone, right? So they're either depending on an individual man to provide to fill in the empty spots on their spreadsheets of needs, or they're depending on the government to step in and do those things for them. So, or both, often both. So, the only independent women are, sort of the very successful single women who've never been married and never had children, that have been earning more than their same age, same situated male peers since the 1980s. So,
wow. Yeah, I was trying to lead into um, how you're more into the family structure.
well, I think the family structure it's extremely important. I mean, there's something like 35 different social metrics that indicate that uh, children raised uh, without a father in the home do more poorly on all of these social metrics. So anything from educational attainment, dropping out of school, being expelled from school, having behavioral disorders, ending up in therapy, ending up addicted to drugs or alcohol, getting involved in gangs, being incarcerated as youths and as adults, having children outside of relationships, having children as teenagers, becoming sexually active at an earlier age, right? All of these things, uh, they happen more to kids who are raised without fathers than they do to kids who are raised with their fathers in the home. And uh, the risk of being a youth who runs away from home is actually something like 35 times higher
Wow.
for kids without a father than kids with a father. The risk of being sexually or physically abused is higher if your biological father is not living with you. So, I mean, and also some of these effects are actually triggered by biology. I don't think that there's any way that you could explain in a social construct or environmental social sense, how it is that girls who are raised without their biological father in the home actually reach menarche, the onset of menstruation, significantly earlier than girls who are raised with their fathers. So you're sort of looking at accelerated puberty in girls who don't have their dads in the home, and all kinds of other things that are sort of triggered by epigenetics that cause biological responses to environmental factors. So, I mean, when you look at the nuclear family structure, um, what you see is if you have an intact family where both biological parents are raising their children within a stable home, that's the gold standard. And that's not saying that you can't have other situations that are reasonably positive for children. It's just that that's the gold standard, and that's the one standard that we should actually be encouraging to dominate. And the worst outcomes tend to be from homes in which a single mother is the head of household. And I'm not saying that that's because mothers are worse than fathers. That could be totally self-selection bias, right? Because even really shitty mothers can get custody of their kids, uh, whereas you have to be quite the stellar father to get sole custody of your children. So that might just be a matter of it's only the good fathers that actually get sole custody of their kids versus, any mother can pretty much get sole, unless she's like completely irredeemable, can get sole custody of her kids.
So, how are you a conservative trapped in a liberal area like Canada, and why, why this blog? Where do you want to go with this blog?
Well, I wouldn't even really call myself a conservative. I'm somebody who looks at the evidence and tries to, kind of uh, assess it on its merits, right? So I was in my youth, kind of one of those people who was like people should have the right to divorce for any reason or no reason at all, and single mothers shouldn't be uh, stigmatized, and people who are sexually promiscuous shouldn't be stigmatized. But then when I looked at the actual data, and all of this kind of social fallout from those types of behaviors, right? Then I was just like, okay, well, maybe, like, I'm not saying outlaw it, but I am saying maybe let's encourage the things that have the better outcomes. That like Ben Shapiro says, if you want to get yourself out of poverty, here's three things you can do, right? Finish high school, uh, and get a job, and don't have kids until you're married, right? And those are the three best ways that you can lift yourself out of poverty. It's almost guaranteed that you can do it by doing those things. And it may not take 3 weeks, it may take a few years or even a decade to do so. But if you do those three things, you will actually end up, rising yourself up out of poverty. Um, so when you kind of look at the common sense things, there are a lot of conservative positions that I don't agree with. But when you look at the things that actually have data to back them up, that are conservative positions, yeah, if the data backs them up, I'm going to back them. So, I mean, and where am I going with my work online? I don't know. I'm going where the information takes me, and that's always sort of been my position. I gave up the idea of a goal, or a vision of what the world should look like. I gave that up way back in like 2012 or something like that, because I I sort of had an idea of what I wanted society to look like, and then I realized, okay, well, what am I doing now? I'm ignoring evidence that would get in the way of that, that would essentially say to me that that's really not possible. I'm giving extra weight to evidence that's working in favor of that goal or that vision, right? I'm not being objective. So I guess my entire position is to inform, really, to just inform people of what's going on. Not I don't have a prescriptive agenda. So
So, in your blog and owning your shit, can you tell us how to own our shit? What's going on with the riots?
what's going on with the riots? The riots are ridiculous. You know, there is plenty of data out there showing that on a per interaction basis with police, um, that the police are actually less likely to shoot an unarmed black suspect than they are to shoot an unarmed white suspect. There's both observational data on that and also experimental data that supports that as well.
I've had guns
Putting
in my face. I've had cops next to me with itchy trigger fingers.
I've never experienced that, but I'm in Canada. All our cops are excruciatingly polite. So,
Oh
um,
man, this is definitely not Canada.
yeah, no. Every single interaction that I've ever had with police, and I've had several, has been positive, right? It's very upsetting to think that that might not ever, that might not one day be the case, that I might have a negative interaction with police. Um, what when you look at the racialized way that this is being framed, right? There are issues of police brutality. There are issues of police crossing a line. There are issues of bad cops, and there are systemic barriers in the way of getting rid of them. I would say police unions are number one on that list, because they're only they're not interested in justice. They're not interested in doing what's right. Their mandate is to protect their members, their union members. Yeah. At whatever cost, right? They're essentially like a defense lawyer, only without the threat of being disbarred if they break any ethics rules, right?
Right.
So
well, they have to. They get to break rules to catch people breaking them. They have to speed to catch somebody. They have to pretend that they're a drug dealer to catch a drug addict.
Well, sure, but at the same time, what you have is you have situations where certain individual cops, I believe, are bad, and this is just the case. This is just the case. You're going to see this with teachers who are child molesters, and the reason that they go into teaching is because it gives them access to children, and you will have some people who slip through the psychological tests, when that you have to go through when you want to become a cop, who want to be a cop because they want to be a big man who bosses people around or whatever, right? There's going to be bad eggs in every single bunch, no matter where you are, whether it's teaching or a daycare or police or the military or anyone, right? Or politics. You're going to have some people who are actually like just not that great, maybe toxic, maybe going to break the rules, not just bend them. But I don't really see any evidence of the police targeting the black community in the U.S. Without actual data-based reasons, right? So yes, blacks have more encounters with police. Well, that's because blacks commit more crime, right, than other ethnic groups, including Hispanics, including whites, including Asians, right? So when blacks are committing more crime, disproportionate amount of crime, they're going to have a disproportionate number of encounters with police. But when they do have those encounters with police, they're actually less likely to be the victim of an unjustified shooting than a white person is. So, I mean, this is a much more complex situation than anyone on the side of the protests wants to admit. They definitely don't want to scrutinize the reasons why blacks are so much more likely to commit crimes, and then as a result of that sort of come into contact with police, because they would then have to look at some of the issues within the black community, that the rampant fatherlessness, which if you actually control for fatherlessness, the race disparity in incarceration virtually vanishes between blacks and whites if you just control for that one factor. So, I mean, they'd have to actually look at their culture, their community within sort of those inner city Black communities that are, that have these problems with crime. They'd have to look at what they're doing, that's sort of enabling uh, that kind of crime culture. So,
Well,
and they don't want to do it.
isn't there some other political organizations that are kind of, I don't know, um, undermining the original intent of the protest and using it to their advantage in causing division?
Oh, well, I mean, are you saying has Black Lives Matter been co-opted by a different agenda?
Yes,
Is Yeah,
pretty
no,
much.
they always had that agenda. Like ever since they started, they ostensibly started because Black men were being shot by police. Um, but even when you go back to their initial sort of iterations of their website, it was always a Marxist project. It was, Black men are barely mentioned, even in the earliest iterations of their, I guess, their brochures or their pamphlets, their leaflets and stuff like that. That they're using Black men as a Trojan horse. Black men killed by police as a Trojan horse to get in an entirely different agenda. Like part of their agenda, Black Lives Matter UK says that their agenda is distinctly anti-capitalist and all of that. In the U.S., there's another um, extremely Marxist policy position that they openly state that they want to disrupt the nuclear family structure because it's systemically oppressive, and that's been a communist Marxist principle right from the beginning of the Soviet Union all the way to Ceausescu's a disastrous boast that the state could raise Romanian children better than their parents could, and that led to the horrific psychological damage or destruction of 500,000 Romanian children who were raised in essentially baby factories and without any kind of reasonable human interaction. They grew up to be sociopaths, psychopaths, attachment disordered. Um, they had psychological or psychosocial dwarfism, which means that you're so deprived of social interaction as a child that you simply stop growing. You actually experience a form of dwarfism. So I mean, like it was a disastrous policy, but the nuclear family was a threat to the idea of everybody is equal, everybody is the same, right? Because in the nuclear family, you have things called parents and you have things called non-parents. And in the nuclear family, you have things called mothers and things called fathers. And that means no one's actually equal, no one's identical, no one's the same. So give your kids to the state and have them raise them. And it was just an absolute catastrophe in Romania. There are
It's
500,000 children right now who are looking to sue the Romanian government over that.
we're definitely hearing some of those Marxist beliefs in the United States. I hear some of that crap coming from my own daughter.
Oh yeah, no, and this isn't new in the U.S. either. I mean, like Catherine McKinnon and uh, other Sheila Jeffries and some of the big feminist names um, within the West, right? The UK, Australia, the US, they were advocating that children should be raised collectively by the state, that there should not be that the destruction of marriage was essential to women's liberation, that it had to be completely dismantled. The nuclear family had to go out the window, and there should be no such thing as marriage and no such thing as parenthood. You have sex with whoever you want, you have a baby, you give it to the state to raise. That was sort of on their agenda, and this is back in the 1970s. So, I mean, this isn't anything, there's nothing new under the sun in the West here when it comes to this stuff. The only thing that's new is that there's such an embrace of it on the part of multi-billion dollar multinational corporations, um, on the part of certain members of the government, certain members of what people call the deep state, which is just the bureaucracy that does not go out the door when the outgoing administration also goes out the door. They stay in their positions. Um, it's infested human resources departments, the law, sort of the American Law Institute, and their model penal code. It's infested uh, K to 12 education, social work, all of these, journalism, um, pretty much everywhere. And here's the thing, right? Like, this is the culmination of a long campaign within academia that started before the 60s, but really accelerated in the 60s to kind of apply the critical theory, class conflict theory lens to everything. Um, the class conflict theory lens is the Marxist lens, right? There are oppressors and there are oppressed people. Everything is about power. Some people
There's
have it. They
victims.
oppress people who don't, and that's the ultimate true way to look at the world, right? But what you have is um, these anything that ends with studies, right? The any course or program that ends with the word studies is probably one of these courses that teaches this one way of looking at the world. And there are other ways of looking at the world, like utilitarianism and uh, pragmatism and things like that, right? But you have these students who are both being indoctrinated in this way of seeing things, but these are also what are considered activist disciplines, which means activism is actually a component of the curriculum. It's you get credit for doing some sort of community organizing approach. Even my children, when they were in high school, were subjected to in career and life management. It's a mandatory course in high school. They didn't teach them about what a credit rating was or what you would need one for and how to get one.
Or how to
They didn't
balance a
teach
checkbook.
you how to open a bank account. They didn't teach you how to make a budget, a household budget. What they taught you was how to make an activist poster, right? How to make a poster for an activist, a charitable or activist event, right? And I was like, what the hell are they like? Why do my kids need to know this, right? They need to know all these other things, right? And but what you have is this situation where you have these students who are being indoctrinated in this one view of the world, one way of viewing the world, and then they are encouraged to go out and change society. So where are they going to go? I mean, this isn't necessarily conspiracy. Um, of course, these kids who are highly passionate and politically activated are going to go into all of the fields in which they can spread, in which they can proselytize this doctrine and implement it into our other institutions. And so now all of our institutions are pretty much infested with this particular doctrine. And it's going to take uh, essentially 25 years um, to uproot it if we can, because these people have been so converted to this way of thinking that
My lady,
rationality isn't going to reach them.
my lady, I really hate to cut you off. I could listen to you for hours on end, but we've already went over the time, and
It's all good.
I there's just so much more to talk about. I hope that you'll let me pick your brain again another time. Uh,
Absolutely.
Real quick, how do we find you?
You find me on Parlor at Girl Writes What, and you find me on YouTube, user/Girl Writes What, and you can find me on owningyourshit.blogspot.com, and you can also find me on Honey Badger Radio. Usually I'm there on Thursday nights, and that's on YouTube, and a bunch of other podcast platforms. And also, you can probably find me just by Googling my name and Straughan, and you'll probably find a lot of stuff on other places other than places that I own.
Mm,
So
probably in the last several years that I've done radio, I think this is the first time I get to say a cuss word. So I get to say, don't forget to check out her, her blog, Owning Your Shit. I love it. I am Jaybird Wells, your hostess. You have been tuned into watching Tea Time with PJ Gangsta. Don't forget to go into Wichita, Kansas. Check out Nap Weaponry. Check out Al's Old Bookstore. Go to Pratt, Kansas. Check out In Cahoots. Give a shout out to KJAG Radio. And tune in next time.
Karen, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you making time for me and Jay today.